Martin, can you hear us all right?
Yep, can hear.
Excellent. And hello everyone else online too. I'm not just ignoring everyone else. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year to all our observers. Thank you all for dialing into this first meeting of 2026, this meeting of the Cabinet at Tunbridge and Morning Borough Council. For the benefit of those who are watching on our YouTube channel, members of the Cabinet and others are present in the chamber this evening, and these members will be voting on proposals. There are other members of the council in attendance, so they can take part in discussions and ask questions, but cannot vote. Please can I draw everyone's attention to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance on how meetings will be conducted. Before we start business, I shall just do a roll call and ask Cabinet members to introduce themselves. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nat Borton. I'm the Chairman of the Cabinet at the Council, and I am the leader of the Council. Des, can you introduce yourself?
Indeed. Good evening, everyone. Des Kears, the Cabinet Member for Community Services.
Good evening, Adam Memmott, Cabinet Member for Infrastructure and Regeneration.
Mike Taylor, Cabinet Member for Planning.
There are two other members of the Cabinet. Martin Coffin is joining us remotely this evening, and we have apologies from Robin Betts too. We also joined this evening by officers. I'll ask you all to introduce yourselves, starting with those in the chamber. Paul.
Thank you. Paul Worden, Head of Finance.
Linda.
Hi, Linda Hibbs, Head of Housing and Health.
Stuart Edwards, Head of Administrative and Property Services.
Alison Paris, Principal Democratic Services Officer.
And I see officers online. I'll just read you out and hopefully I get everyone. So Damien Roberts, I think you're online. Can you hear us?
Good evening, Leader. Good evening, members.
Thank you. Adrian Stanfield.
Evening, Chair. I'm Director of Central Services.
Thank you. Laura French.
Good evening. Tunbridge Castle, Events and Customer Services Manager.
Thank you. Eleanor Hoyle.
Good evening. Director of Planning, Housing and Environmental Health.
Thank you. Dean Radmore.
Good evening. Dean Radmore, Tunbridge Town Centre Programme Manager.
Thank you. And James Bailey.
Good evening, members. Head of Planning.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much for introducing yourselves. Right, we shall move on with the agenda proper. Item 1 is the guidance on how meetings will be conducted that I referred to earlier. Item 2 are apologies for absence. We've got an apology from Robin Betts for this evening and apology for in-person attendance from Martin Coffin. Agenda item 3 are declarations of interest. Does any member have any interest to declare? No. Okie doke. Item 4 are the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on Tuesday, the 18th of November. Can I agree those as a correct record of the meeting, please? They were agreed unanimously. Thank you all very much. We now move on to page 23, which are our executive key decisions for this evening. The first, or this one, relates to fees and charges for 2026-27 in relation to legal fees, photocopy and land charges, street naming and numbering, Tunbridge Castle events, billboards and banners, and court fees for council tax and business rates. Anything to add, Paul? That's all. Okay, great. Any other officer wish to add anything about theirs? If not, you're all here to answer questions. Adrian's gone. As always, sorry, Adrian, did you wish to add anything? You're on mute, Adrian.
No, thank you, Chair. I think given the breadth of the fees that you just explained, I think it'd be easier just to allow members to invite questions from Cabinet, and we'll go from there.
Excellent. Thank you, Adrian. I entirely agree. As always, members, what I'll do is I'll come to members who aren't in Cabinet first, and then I'll come to Cabinet colleagues at the end. Although I don't actually see any questions from members who aren't in Cabinet, so I'll come to Cabinet colleagues. Any questions on any of the fees? No? Okay. Well, in that case, on page 24, we have 9 different recommendations for the fees. In the interests of time, I will not go through each and every single one, and neither will I read them all out. But they're at the top of page 24, and hopefully everyone has seen them on the agenda. I'm happy to propose all of the fees en bloc. Can I have a seconder, please? Mike, you got there first. Cabinet, can we agree those collectively? Excellent. Thank you very much. We now come on to agenda item 6, which are another set of fees and charges in relation to the discretionary planning services 26-27. Now, these were discussed and debated at the Housing and Planning Scrutiny Select Committee that met on the 2nd of December. We happen to have the chair of that committee in the chamber tonight. So, Dennis, anything to add from that? No?
No, Chair.
No. Excellent. Okay. Paul, from finance perspective, anything? No? I don't see any questions. Cabinet colleagues, anything to add? No? Okay. So at the bottom of page 41, we've got 8 different fees that have come from the select committee. Again, I'm happy to propose those all en bloc. Save reading them out. Can I have a seconder, please? Des, thank you. Can we agree them collectively? That was agreed collectively. Thank you all very much. Agenda item 7 are HMO and caravan site licensing fee charges for 2026-27. Again, this went to the Housing and Planning Scrutiny Select Committee meeting of the 2nd of December 2025. Dennis, anything to add? Nothing. Any questions on this item? No. Cabinet colleagues, anything to add? No. Okay, so just 3 recommendations from the committee this time: that the proposed fee for licensing HMOs, detailed in 5.1 of that report, be approved. That the proposed fee for caravan sites for permanent residential use, that's at 5.2 in that report, be approved, and that these be implemented from 1st of April 2026. Again, I'm happy to propose. Can I have a seconder, please? Anyone? Adam, thank you very much. Can we agree those collectively? We can. That was agreed. That was agreed unanimously. Thank you all very much. We will then come on to agenda item 8. This is the adoption of a calculator for indoor sports, outdoor sports and play and pitch developer contributions that was discussed at the same meeting of the Housing and Planning Scrutiny Select Committee on the 2nd of December. Dennis, as chair of that committee, anything to add? No. Adam, this falls in your portfolio. Anything to add?
No, just say it's an important piece of work that will allow us to collect contributions towards indoor sports from new developments.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any questions on our calculator? I don't see any. Cabinet colleagues, anything to add? No? Okay. So again, at the bottom of page 83, we've got 2 recommendations and the third one over. Again, they're quite lengthy, so I won't read them all out. I'm happy to propose. Adam, happy to second. Can we agree that collectively, please? Excellent. Thank you all very much. Right, we now come to page 151 for agenda item 9, which I suspect will be a little bit longer than those items that we've just discussed. This is the reserves review, and I'll hand over to Paul to introduce.
As part of the annual service delivery plan, I was asked to undertake a review of the council's reserves balances to identify any potential areas that had funds that could be retargeted for council priorities. I undertook that review during the latter half of last calendar year, with this being the final outcome of the result. Through the review, I managed to identify just over £2.1 million worth of money in various reserves that were either no longer required or could be reduced on the grounds that the reserves balances that were being held potentially be considered to be too high. That money itself was there. It's proposed to transfer back to the General Revenue Reserve, which would increase the General Revenue Reserve. And then, in order to target those particular areas where we are in need of financial need, I've then proposed a second set of transfers from the General Revenue Reserve into those reserves, which will be included as part of the revised estimates that are being sent to Overview and Scrutiny Committee, with the print deadline being next week. The key areas that were identified for the need for additional funds were the Angel Centre being the largest capital project the council has undertaken within the last 25 years. Building repairs, which we are having to maintain all of our buildings within the borough, and costs that are beginning to rise. And Stuart will probably agree with me that we need to have a little bit of extra money in there just in case the costs that we are looking at are above where we thought we were going to be. The local plan, on the grounds that the local plan is now, well, Reg 18 consultation is just finished. The work that is going to be needed to undertake that is always going to be quite significant, and we felt that we should increase the reserve for that. And finally, the last one was on transformation for local government reorganisation. It's one of those things now that we've submitted our bid at the end of November. The work that will be undertaken on that will be quite substantial over the next couple of years. The concern is that officers' time is going to be quite pulled in several directions, and this money could therefore be used to assist with any costs associated with that. The transfer of that £2 million leaves an estimated balance of just over 9.25 million in the General Revenue Reserve at the end of 2028. Just before we go into local government reorganisation, I would remind members though that there is a large expected withdrawal from the General Revenue Reserve in those years, partly down to contractual arrangements with the refuse contract that we're currently undertaking at the moment. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions with the 2 recommendations currently being shown at paragraph 3.1 and 3.2. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for your work on this. So that's just for members and observers' benefit too. Page 152, 153 and 100 and the top of 154 of the agenda. These detail the recommendations in terms of transfers from different reserves, and then there's a recommendation for paragraph 7.2, which looks at transferring from the general reserve into reserve pots. Any questions? There are no hands that I see online. Cabinet colleagues, anything? Questions? No? Okay, super. Well, in that case, I don't really sort of have a question, but it's sort of more of a statement, really, Paul, if that's all right, which is this, I think, is an incredibly important report on the basis that this essentially sets us up for an awful lot to do over next year. I mean, the way I sort of described this is a bit like getting your tactics board ready in a game before you actually offer get your team, get your money in the right place. You're not able to spend it on the things that matter in line with our annual service delivery plan. time with some of the big challenges coming, like local government reorganisation. So that's why I think this is a really important piece of work, and I'm happy to support the recommendations that have been made. The two recommendations are at the bottom of page 101. So we're asked to approve the transfer from reserves as detailed in paragraph 5.4, which, given it's 2.5 pages long, I will not read out in full, and also the transfers from the general revenue reserve to for £1 million to the Angel Centre, build costs 250,000 to building repairs funds, 350,000 to local plan, and 400,000 to the transformation reserve for local government reorganisation. I'm happy to propose all of that. Hopefully you all followed it. Mike, don't know whether you agree in second or that you followed it all, but I'll take that as agreeing to second. Can we agree that collectively, please? Excellent. I see nods all around. Thank you all very much. Right, we now come on to agenda item 10. This is on page 159. This is the Planning Advisory Service review of the Council's planning service. This went to the Housing and Planning Scrutiny Select Committee on the 2nd of December. And as I said earlier, Dennis chaired that meeting, is in the chamber. So Dennis, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, the Housing and Planning Scrutiny Committee looked at the PAS report, and from my perspective, the main agenda item was the 14-point recommendation action plan, which came out of that. But that was preceded by taking it to the floor. And to be honest, there was surprisingly little comment. I'll come back to that. But the main contributors were myself, Councillor Taylor, and Councillor Oakley. The recommendations with their individual action points were passed with some minor modifications, and it is now entered into the work programme of the committee. But I'd like to say that that's the high point on the radar. I think what needs to be discussed this evening is how we progress with the actual work on those recommendations from here on in. But coming back to the report itself, I think it was disappointing in the sense that it was largely a gripe list from rather one-sided, and it's carried out over 3 or 4 days by the PAS team. And it highlighted 7 areas that I picked up, and all of which really need to be addressed and are quite fundamental, particularly as we're moving into the local plan period. One which was considered key, because it was flagged by officers, was one of member relations. I think it was rather over-amplified, and it indicated a lack of perception on officers' parts of the different conflicts of interest that members face and why they're elected, and how they have to answer to the public. Whereas I think the officers on our part are always given respect in the sense they're the experts on the rules-based game of planning. But we were accused of taking a forensic approach at times, which I thought was actually quite a good thing, because that's it sets us down the road of looking at planning applications in a detailed way, which is what I think we're all supposed to do. But then we went on to the local plan, which I thought was rather over-egged, because most of the problems that were actually highlighted were normal business, and I think they were focusing on call-ins, which in actual fact are relatively small, as 95 to 98% of planning work is carried out under devolved responsibility. So the local plan is a relevance because it is something we're coming to now, and it's something that we should all understand that there will be many tensions involved, particularly as the officers have the responsibility to present us with a set of options to try and meet government targets. And we have to come to terms with the fact that government targets are those which we don't like, and options many of which people won't like. So there is quite a potential opportunity for conflict, which people have to address in a grown-up way rather than just considering it's about combat between individuals, which it isn't. There was disappointing comments about public confidence, one person actually said the public was seen as an irritant. Well, sorry, but that's what we're here to represent. And I think people have got to get used to that. There were a myriad of cultural issues, which I have no idea if they're really true or not, but it's perception as much as anything about lack of decision making on individuals, upward referrals, which indicates a lack of trust, or they feel a lack of trust, ownership and responsibility and empowerment, which I think obviously the management team in the council will be taking those points quite seriously. And the feeling of separation within the council between the planning teams and also within the planning teams themselves. And as a side reference, I think it might be useful at some time to think about whether or not home working is actually working very well. I did point out some time back that there is a downside to people working in isolation. One of which I experienced in the past myself is people tend to copy things to higher management, which they don't need to, because it covers their rear and also makes them look important, which is a complete waste of time. But it indicated that was going on to an extent. The other point was workload. It was identified that people felt they were overworked, but I don't think the PAS team actually agreed with them. It actually said that the workload was wholly consistent, but obviously perception means that people feel that they're rather hard done by. And the other one is process issues. Well, we all know about the planning tools that we've had problems with, and we hope that will be resolved shortly, and I'm sure it will improve the process times for applications. So I think all in all, what we're really saying is that we have to get together with officers, and there has to be a two-way perception, because at some point we'll need to make decisions, and it is the members that run the council, and then we'll have to take responsibility for the decisions, and we have to accept that we work on the advice given, and we will make decisions against that advice. So I think that the report was disappointing in so many ways. So I guess I'll shut up now, but what I basically think is each of those recommendations needs an action plan in its own right. We need to know who's going to actually be on those teams, and what the timescale with is, and how we're going to manage that communication and report back on it. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Dennis. I think that's an incredibly helpful contribution. I'll come to members who aren't in Cabinet next, and then I'll come and I'll allow if Eleanor or James wish to contribute to, and then Cabinet members. That's all right. So Anita's put a hand up, and if anyone else wishes to contribute, up to Anita.
Thank you. I'd just briefly like to say that was a good and fair overview of what went on at that meeting, and perhaps the nature of the report has actually made members sort of think twice about questioning it to some degree, and I do think that you know, we look forward to the future, and I don't think the relationship between members and officers is broken. I think it's limping along, but it's okay, and can only be improved. So I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. I don't see any other hands with any contributions. Just before I come on to Cabinet members, I don't know, Eleanor or James, whether you wish to comment on anything that Dennis said at this point, or whether you wish to come back later, or whether you wish to say anything at all. Eleanor?
Thank you, Councillor Borton. I think it's probably best if James and I wait until members have spoken, and then if there's anything particularly we need to respond to, we could then.
Excellent, no worries at all. Right, I don't see any other hands. Cabinet members, anything to add? I was going to come to you, Mike, as Cabinet Member Planning. You're pointing to Adam. Oh, he's pointing to Des. Okay, there you go. We've eventually got to you, Des.
Never sit at the end of the line. Look, I just wanted to say that I do applaud the fact that TNBC, the chief exec and the directors have taken the opportunity to have a look at themselves in the mirror. It's not easy. It's never an easy thing to do, but we have asked a team to come in and look at us and say what they feel they established from the inspection. And it's never easy to do that. And I think that's a really good and positive thing. And all I'm just going to say is that, and I echo what Dennis said, is we do really need now as a way forward to have some ownership of each and every recommendation. You know, we've got letters after some of the recommendations, but I would just like to have some sort of like knowledge of what grip we're going to get on each and every recommendation. Who's going to own it? Who's going to action it? When we will be getting feedback, updates, etc. And where are the milestones? You know, all those sort of little things that you would expect in some sort of project like this. And worst case scenario, it just drags on and on and on. So this is something I think we really need to grasp. We've got the potential to do it. We've got the officers to do it, and I just hope we see some successful outcomes from each and every one of the recommendations from the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Des. Just looking at this, if anyone got Annex 3, I have a hard copy in front of me. You'll see that there's a timescale and an owner of each of the recommendations. Also includes in recommendations that have come from the committee that progress on the action plan be reported to the May meeting. Well, but here I'll invite him to speak on whether the actually have a Dennis, do you
well, I do, in the sense that what was said was May was what was proposed, and I actually added, if not before, but I do worry that this is quite a detailed and wide-ranging review, and it won't be possible to actually go through it in detail. So I think what we need to do is have a high-level snapshot of each of the action points, but we need to actually have some confidence that the progress is on target for each.
Yes, and we can. Adam?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think just to sort of echo what everyone else has said, really, I think what this ultimately is you know, an opportunity to try and improve the service a bit. I think, you know, there are instances that all members could probably say where they felt the planning function hasn't sort of performed exactly as they or residents might have hoped for at certain points over the last few years. With LGR sort of on the horizon, this is probably our last opportunity to try and, you know, work together with officers and sort of deliver improvements to that service. And I think it's something that's quite important to everyone, really. There's a couple of things I would probably pick up on as examples of that. I think that one of the main problems I have that I think is not helpful to rebuilding officer member trust, and that's something the review has picked up on, is the sort of the ping pong we seem to play sometimes with applications going back and forth to committees and then cost reports being repaired and things like that. And I think it doesn't probably reflect very well on us as a council. As far as I'm aware, no other council does that. So I think it's something that should probably be brought into the action plan of the PAS review, and perhaps a further recommendation to have another look at the way the deferral process works. And that's not to say that it doesn't serve a purpose. It's obviously very important that, you know, unsubstantiated decisions aren't made. But I think that the whole back and forth thing, and, you know, 3 rounds of committee, you know, the officer time it takes up, you know, the perception from members of the public who have to attend all those meetings, you know, just isn't the way to do it. And that's probably going to get worse and worse over the next couple of years with the amount of applications that are going to be coming in. So I would perhaps like to suggest that there's another action plan item on there to have another look at the deferral process and take into account things like sort of member engagement and sort of new initiatives on that, and just try and come up with a better way of doing it. So that's something I feel quite strongly about. The second thing, which is something that has been difficult for me, is I think there's been a number of occasions, particularly in Tunbridge, where applications have either come forward or been approved that members haven't been aware of, where the design just has fallen very, very short of our expectations and our residents' expectations as well. And I think there's probably a couple of problems with that. I think it's probably a lack of understanding from officers as to what those expectations are from members in terms of design. It's something that we haven't really looked at all since this administration started. And I think it goes again to that kind of issues with sort of, you know, trust and building member relations. And if officers kind of, understand a bit more where members are coming from or what they want to see, then they can help shape those development proposals before they come to us at committee. So I think it's that, and then just ensuring that officers have confidence in their skill set and their training, kind of recognise what good design is. So I noticed obviously there's an action plan to have a think about some workshops and things, but I would probably like to kind of firm that up and perhaps specifically start with a design workshop held jointly with members and officers, and perhaps for that to be actioned as soon as sort of possible in the coming months. I think that would be quite a good sort of place to start. And then really just overall, I think some of these action plan items are for example, it does talk about work commencing in December 26, but it also says some of these things will be carried out May 26 and October. So maybe just some clarity on that. But I think the longer we leave some of these points, the less chance they are to be effective before LGR. So I'd be keen, obviously understanding off the work frames and things like that, to get on with it as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Adam. Mike, did you wish to add?
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got to agree with everything that's been said on this bench tonight. Been thinking long and hard about the trust issue, and I think that's a bit of a strong word to use in this context. And I think Dennis hit the nail right on the head. This isn't much trust as the fact that planners and local members come from a different world, and we have to represent the views of our residents and quite often our own views, and we're actively anti-development and officers aren't, and that creates a tension. I think attention is a better word than lack of trust. Deferrals, I firmly believe that if we get a proper early engagement program in place, those sort of issues will be picked up early, but we won't go through this ping pong like Ivy Farm with 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 deferrals. It can be decided beforehand. If we're headed the wrong way, the officers have got the chance to guide us early on before it gets to that point. But the whole process, whilst we don't want to risk doing it too quickly and bogging it up, it needs to be done at speed. Otherwise, we're still going to be going through this and we disappear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I see Eleanor put her hand up. Eleanor, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. A lot of really valuable feedback there, picking up on a lot of what was said at the H&P meeting. Just to pick up on a few points, the owner of each action is detailed in the action plan, and that is very specifically spread out from me through James as the head of planning, through our development manager, through other managers, and through the planning business manager, to spread that workload, but also to reflect the level at which we were recommending that the action needed to be managed. Very happy to take member comments on if they think that needs to be handled differently. There is also a timescale column in there, and that's what we think is reasonable. There's a lot of work in this action plan, and that's alongside a lot of other service priorities. So we've tried to be realistic about what we think we can achieve and how quickly we can achieve it, and also not achieving things for the sake of them, but making sure that actually if they are put in place that they're properly embedded and they do make a change in the service. So that's where the timetable comes from. In terms of keeping things under review, sorry, I'm struggling a bit with a cold, so if I sound like I'm taking huge gasping breaths, it's it's not emotion, it's just not being able to breathe. In terms of keeping the action plan under review, it was discussed at the H&P meeting around that first recommendation around embedding the strategic leadership, vision and culture, that there's a check-in session proposed ahead of the report coming back to May H&P for some senior members and officers, and I think it was Councillor King who proposed that chairs and vice chairs of the area committees should also be added to that session. So that might be something that we might want to consider. Absolutely fine to add in an action around the deferral process. I think what I'm really keen to do is try and keep the structure of the action plan, which is that on the back of the recommendations from the PAS review team who came in and did this independent review, we've then proposed actions to respond to them. So to pick up on Councillor Mehmet's point about that, I just need to have a quick check about where we could add that, but absolutely no issue about adding that in. Similarly with design, I think it probably comes under 2 of the actions, because there is an action at R7, a recommendation which talks about parish council and other community engagement. The reason I mentioned that one is that the practical example that they gave was around local lists and conservation areas. There's a really good area of work for that. Perhaps design might also be another one of those. And there is a recommendation around joint training at R12 as well, where again we could put in a joint training session for officers and members around design, around the importance of good design, but also around what the guidance is, and therefore what officers have to follow, because I think that's the use from my perspective of having joint sessions, is to help everybody gain a better understanding of what each other has to consider when they're making decisions. And then I think the only other point I'd pick up on is around what Councillor Taylor was saying. I don't think it's that officers are pro-development. I think it's that officers' job is to interpret the legislative framework and the guidance and present that to members. And at the moment, the entire planning system is designed to see an increase in development, and therefore I can entirely understand how that comes across in that way. But on principle, that's not what officers are here to do. They're not here to promote or indeed not promote development. It's to assess the applications that are in front of us. And I think it was Councillor King who used the phrase around that kind of technical planning exercise often being at odds with what members are there to do in representing their communities, and we're very conscious of that. And I really hope that some of the actions in here around joint training, we've obviously spoken about design this evening. Green belt is another issue that has been raised that we'd like to put on a training session about as soon as possible, given continued changes in the MPPF. I think some of those sessions should be really, really useful. I would say, though, if there are things in this action plan that members don't think are happening fast enough according to the current dates, it would be really helpful to know, so we can have a conversation about what else might need to be prioritised differently in order to ensure that we're able to meet the actions in this action plan, and as I said before, also meet other service priorities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Eleanor. Don't see Dennis. Did you want to say something? Then I'll finish the item.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up on the point that Mike was making, because I've given it a lot of thought as well. Recommendation 3, which is the officer-member relationships, and it refers to the us versus them dynamic. I find that rather sad, to be honest. I don't think it's largely true, but I understand and sympathise with the officer's perception sometimes, because it generally comes to a head in a planning meeting. And I think that's part of the problem. I won't be alone in being unhappy about the call-in process itself, and have been for a long time. Because we talk about early engagement with developers and what have you, but I don't think we've got early engagement with members. And I think if the relationship was honest, open at the early stages when there is an issue with an application, then there'd be a much more frank exchange of views, and much more help could be offered in a non-confrontational perspective. Now, so I think, and Mike raised this to H&P some time back, and we've got to look at it, but within the context of this recommendation, it's crucial. And we do need to, sooner rather than later, sit down with members and officers and explain the various dynamics, because we do get subject to to local pressure from residents, and we do have a knowledge gap sometimes, and we need to share that. And we also need them to understand why, from a non-rules-based perspective, something may not be to our liking. And I think that was really where we need to start, to get early engagement between members and officers, and going where I believe it has happened in the past, and it hasn't been happening here for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. If you just hold that for Adam, Mark could put his hand up. We'll do this all a second time. So if everyone wants to sort of contribute for a second time, then you're welcome to. Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to have a say in this, Chairman. I think it is important that we do make it clear that there isn't a level of animosity at all between members and the planning officers, I think what's happening is there's a sense of frustration because we're all working within a framework which isn't to our choosing, and quite a lot of the time planning committee members feel quite powerless because of the changes to the MPPF. But we recognise that it's the role of our officers to set out their recommendations according to the MPPF and planning policy guidance. And I think it's a shame that officers may feel that that's the case, but rest assured, I think from my own point of view that we certainly do value their opinion and their guidance. It's just that common sense doesn't seem to play a great deal of influence over planning at the moment, does it? And I think we would probably all agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you, James Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I think I wanted to just add in something in terms of what Dennis was saying, in terms of, and something that obviously came before H&P and has been agreed previously, and is obviously in the agreed fees that members have just approved. But I think we've added more structure around the sort of member engagement, where we can engage with the area planning committees in terms of, we've got forward programming in place now. And a more procedural structure around the engagement strategy. So I think the new fee structure that we've kind of introduced, that was kind of led by Mike, is going to have a much bigger impact moving forward. As I said, it was only introduced very recently in October, November of last year, and I think that will see a sort of a big increase in members wanting to engage and developers wanting to have conversations early with members, because I think that is fundamentally key to getting the process, more understood, and to get members to be able to influence changes that they wish to see it in very early stages. So I just wanted to add something on the basis of what Dennis was saying about the early engagement. And as I said, I think that process is now in a better position because we've got a stronger procedural guidance around it. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, James. That's very helpful. I don't see any other hands. So Cabinet members, I think Adam wanted to say something, and then we'll look to wrap up. Adam.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I think just to say, I should have said it the first time. Obviously, nothing I said was meant as any criticism of any particular kind of officer, and we do obviously value their input and advice. But I think, I think Mark made a fair point that obviously the scope of what us as members can influence new development is getting increasingly limited, and I think that's where the whole point of this exercise through the PAS review comes into play. Because if it is, well, actually, look, sorry, members, you can't refuse this application, or we would struggle to defend a refusal of this application. But how would you like, this kind of design over that design? And that, to me, might be the best we can achieve for our residents. But I think it's worth doing, and it's important to get it right, which is where some of these suggestions have sort of come about from. I think with the early engagement protocol, from what I've seen, it's been very positive so far. But I think it is, we have to bear in mind it's limited to sort of quite a few sort of circumstances. So it's the big applications, and given I think we heard earlier that the majority of decisions are made under delegated powers, I think it's still just trying to make sure that everything is kind of, all applications maybe are delivered with a sort of a sense of what members want to see, what residents want to see. So I think it has to be a little bit broader than just those sort of specific sort of major early engagement kind of cases. Just the final thing I was going to say was I did want some clarity just on that R4 action recommendation, where it said work commences from December 26, but also that there would be some things in May and October of 26, and maybe if that could just be clarified, because that was one of the things I felt was quite critical, really, was the review of the service structure, and considering bringing in heritage design and landscape, specialism, something I think that, housing and planning is quite important to everyone. So maybe just clarification on that.
Eleanor, you've got your hand up. Is that to provide this clarification?
Yes, if I could, Chair, and also just to pick up on the point about early engagement, less so to do with applications that are maybe coming to committee or going through that formal process. I think possibly in terms of the R3 DM11 action and around a programme of workshop sessions, I think we've got some really good instances where members engage early with an officer on an application when they see it on the weekly list, have a conversation, or even before that, if they're aware of it from any pre-application engagement that a developer might have done in the community. Some members and officers do that sort of naturally, others don't so much, and I think that's something that we should all look to work on, that kind of really informal early engagement. So that might be something we could build in as part of that set of actions there around some workshop sessions. In terms of the programme, I know James has been doing some work on the heritage design options, and I think a paper's due to come back to H&P. I want to say March, but James, please correct me if I'm wrong, with an update on that as sort of one of the key service elements that was drawn out. The work has also commenced on a review of the service structure, and so some of the early discussions about that have happened, and that will now be a focus for myself and James, supported by the managers in the planning service over the coming months, so that I can confirm that work has commenced. We don't want it to drag on any longer than it needs to, but as I'm sure members will appreciate from some of the other big discussions that have happened about staffing, there are a lot of moving parts to think about in those discussions, both in terms of kind of what services we provide, in terms of the formal HR discussions that need to take place, the financing of all of that and how all of that works, so that it is quite a detailed piece of work. I would certainly hope by the time we're reporting back to H&P in either March or May, I'm not sure where we've landed on. I think possibly that we'll report back something in March, and that we would have a significant update in terms of progress for members on what that restructure is looking like. But that is all, that work has all commenced.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Right, I don't see any other hands, so I'll look to wrap up what has been discussed, because I think we might want to make some amendments. So, well, not amendments, additions really. So the first is we've got 4 recommendations on page 159 of this agenda that have come from the committee. I think we need to add a 5th one, which is that separate from all of this. I think Adam referenced this earlier, that Cabinet agrees, subject to your vote, that we instigate a review of the, I'm going to call it the deferral process because I can't remember what the name is, but the deferral process for planning applications. It's part 4, paragraph 55 of the Constitution, talking about here. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is looking at Annex 3 at the action plan, at R3, and Adam, tell me if I've got this incorrect from what I said, we need to add, make an addition to that a design workshop, as part of the session of workshops, a design workshop be held with members. That, yep, you're nodding. Okay, that's good. So that's the second thing. The third aspect, I think, would be looking at recommendation 4. It says an update on progress on the action plan be reported to the May meeting of the Housing and Planning Scrutiny Select Committee. Can I suggest that remains, but we also have an additional sentence that says and that progress on the action plan be reported as a standing item to each Housing and Planning Scrutiny Select Committee. And that could simply be the action plan with idea about where we are on them. And then perhaps there's a more, when I would suggest in relation to R1 on the draft action plan and that check-in session, that perhaps the May meeting is a little bit more substantial once that meeting between all of those who are mentioned at the action in. Alison, is that okay? Super. Cabinet colleagues, are you happy with? Super. Can I have? I'm happy to propose because I've added a note to it. Mike's happy to second. Can we agree that, please? That was agreed. Thank you all very much, and thank you all for the contributions. Very, very helpful, important item. Right, we'll move on to agenda item 11. This is the minutes of panels, boards, and other groups. We have 3 sets of minutes to note. We have the Parish Partnership Panel minutes of the 20th of November. We have the Tunbridge Community Forum minutes of the 24th of November. And we have the Joint Transportation Board minutes of the 1st of December. Can we note those minutes, please? Noted. Super. Mike?
Just to pick up on the parish partnership panel where we lodged the landfill register. Since that happened, Nepica Sandpit have started extending to the west and have a new application. Initial ground surveys have discovered an unknown pit containing asbestos. So we haven't found them all yet. Thank you.
I think that's as good an example as we're ever going to get that this document. But yes, it'd be interesting to see what the Minerals Authority and County Council does to assess that. I don't see any other comments, and we've noted those minutes. So item 12 is on page 231. This is the decisions taken by Cabinet members. As ever, I shall ask Cabinet members to speak to the decisions that they have made. Please do put your hand up if you have any questions on it. I won't cover matters that have been discussed at previous Cabinet meetings. So I shall start with decisions after the 18th of November by a decision on the 20th of November from Mike in relation to cross-channel geopark. Anything to add, Mike?
It's a wonderful idea, allied with the Europeans.
Excellent. Thank you. Robin isn't here to talk about the Green Business Grant Scheme round 6, so we can cover that next time. Then turning the page to our December decisions, we have 2 from Adam in relation to the Infrastructure Funding Statement 24-25 and the Authority Monitoring Report 24-25. Anything to add, Adam? No, nothing to add. And there's another one from Robin about the lease on 20-28 Martin Square. Again, I don't have any decisions on, any questions or comments on those decisions. So we'll move on to item 13. These are the notice of forthcoming key decisions that have been published. No questions or comments. Then what we do is we move on to agenda item 14, which are urgent items. We don't have any urgent items. We move on to agenda item 15. This is to exclude the press and public. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube, I do regret that I will have to propose that we move into private session because consideration of the remaining items in public could disclose any exempt information. So my apologies for this. Can I have a seconder to agree to move into part 2? That was Des. Thank you to all those watching on YouTube, and we shall just pause the meeting until we've got